All right, so we are in the third Torah portion in the book of Leviticus, and a lot of it in the first two Torah portions in the beginning of the third Torah portion. A lot of it was about services in the temple, about offerings, and then we got into a drama of the deaths. The tragic deaths of Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu. And now we're shifting into the kosher laws, not so much the kosher laws as in the kosher kitchen laws, but kosher species laws. Because in kosher, there are different stages to it. It starts off with kosher species. Like what's a species, an animal that can be kosher or can become kosher? Because there are some animals, no matter what you do, you can sprinkle holy water and do whatever you want and slaughter properly, it's not going to be kosher. Once we identify kosher species, then we say if you have to and how you have to treat the animals. Kosher slaughter, inspection, parts of the animal which are not kosher. And then it gets into the kitchen of milk and meat and all of that. We don't eat the blood, but it all starts off with kosher species. So in Torah, by far the most focus you'll find scripturally is on the species. And we already started by the idea that when it comes to heavy animals, we'll call it that, both domestic and wild, there are two signs, two elements, zoological elements that will define for us what a kosher animal is. It has to have split hooves and chew its cud. And we mentioned also that the split hooves means it has to be split all the way up. You can, if you're looking down at the hoof of the animal, the foot of the animal, through the hoof, you're able to actually see the flesh, because it's not just split at the bottom, but a bone going up. All right, so we were in the middle of the Hasidic insights on 69, and it was spoken a bit about some of the spiritual guidance and the spiritual significance of the kosher symbols, kosher signs, because kosher signs, if God chose them to be signs for a kosher animal, and the idea of a kosher animal means of eating kosher means that I'm eating something physical, but that it is appropriate and properly spiritually aligned for my soul, because it's not only we get nutrition out of it and strength out of food, and it's not just biological or strength and nutrition, but it's something that where the soul is also deriving nutrition. So we'll talk about the significance and the symbolism and the lessons from the different signs. One of the things we spoke about is that there's the split hoof in it, that it's totally split. In other words, there's something, it's binary. And the binary idea, I guess we call binary, is that the significance that we brought up last week is that people have different tendencies, and none of us encompasses them all. So some of us are a little bit more calm and even-tempered, and some of us are a little more passionate, and that can sometimes come with excitement and temper. It's a temperament, and those are examples of. I mean, I just picked that, but there are many different things where it just we have a lane, a natural lane. So one of the things that the Torah teaches us, and I didn't have time to elaborate on it last week, but we can talk about it now, is that really what each of us has a mission in life. And it's in many ways, in some ways, it's a general mission. I'm a Jewish male, and a lot of people have that mission very similar to mine, put on film today. Jewish female, I have a mission similar to other Jewish females, non-Jewish females. Everybody's got a mission, and some of it really belongs to a group, and then there's a very individualized. That within for me personally, within the rubric of being a Jewish male, I'm me. I'm Mendy Herson, and God gave me a soul and equipped me with certain faculties and equipped me with certain challenges. And my job is to be the best Mendy I can be. And that's me. I'm competing against me. And someone else sitting right next to me might have a lot of similarities to me, but their makeup is different and their challenges are different, and therefore their path in life and their objective in life is somewhat different. We're not working on the same thing necessarily. I've got my own challenges, and where we want to work on is on specifically the challenges. You want to build on the successes, but you want to be able to also use that the successes and the enthusiasm from the successes and the strengthening of character to really tackle the parts of us that aren't such successes and that we need to work on. Those God has set them out for us as projects. So if part of that is looking at our personality and not just relaxing with it, saying, oh, how can I be better in a way that really rises above my tendencies? So, for example, in this week's Torah portion, we have an episode, certainly one of Donna's favorites, is God tells Abraham to bring his son Isaac as an offering, which is it's troublesome, right? Someone's ostensibly going to die, a parent with a child, and it's all set up. And God says, just didn't mean it. Just checking. I wanted to see how loyal you are to me, which is what he says to Abraham. But one of the expressions there that it says in the Torah about Abraham having passed his test and been agreeing without any qualms, without any pushback, without any questions, to go and bring his son, only child, which is, it doesn't, even if you have 10 children, to bring one's child to as an offering, and they're going to die. It's just mind-boggling and extremely disturbing. But he went and did it because God told him to. So afterwards, and he's pretty old at this point, Abraham. He's actually pretty close to the end of his life. He says, relatively speaking, he says, the verse says, now I know, God is saying, now I know that you really respect me. You, Abraham, really respect me. God, you really care about what I want. It's been a long road. Abraham and Sarah together have really shown their mettle and their commitment to God in many different ways through an entire lifetime, have spread monotheism, spread goodness in the world. It's like, why now? And this is actually, and the Talmud lists off, when we see from the scripture, 10 different tests of conviction that Abraham had to go through. And this was the 10th. So what was wrong with the first 9? So one of the ideas, basically, or generally, without delving too much into the story, because right now we want to get back to where we are, is that Abraham was a lover. Abraham was just loved people, loved God, and loved his family. And Abraham insisted and fought against society as a counterculturalist to try to bring the idea of a loving God, love of God, love within humanity to people, and in a society which was quite selfish and really very fear-based. And he was pushing this love idea. So, and he was committed to it. So in a sense, we say God is saying, okay, so you have a personality. You have a loving personality. You're using that loving personality to bring goodness to the world. You're taking the gift I gave you of a personality and you're running with it, to pushing it to potential. You're fantastic. But can you go against your personality is a question. Are you committed enough to me to be able to rise above your natural tendencies? We haven't seen that yet. at least not enough. So God gives him this test, which runs against every core of his being. It's doing violence to someone, doing violence to his child. It means that he's being left without an heir to perpetuate the beauty of the monotheism and the loving mindset that he's brought to the world. There's nothing good about this. There's nothing that makes any sense to him, and it absolutely is. It's his tendency. You think inside, rebels against this in every fiber of his being. And for him to be able to say, yes, God, because I love you and I care about you, and you've told me to do something, I'm going to do it. No questions, no ifs, ands, buts, delays, pushback. I'm going to do what you want. That's really a litmus test of real commitment. Commitment when it hurts. Commitment when it's not my, my natural tendency. So if someone, to take it to a maybe more current idea, someone who is calm and not easily ruffled, to see an injustice and not get ruffled, is that because they are of great, broad mind and self-control, or because they don't get ruffled? Maybe now's the time to get ruffled. You're seeing injustice, get excited. And for someone who is easily triggered and sometimes even flies off the handle, who sees injustice, maybe that person has to say to themselves, I'm not going to get so excited because I lose and it works against the program. I'm going to try and speak in a measured voice, be effective, but I'm going to stay calm because that's the best way to be effective. But I'm going to be firm, but calm, because it's not following my natural flow isn't necessarily what's called for now. So the idea of looking at ourselves and recognizing that we have a particular temperament, and doubtless when we see ourselves, a lot of our particular temperament can be used for the good, and we should continue to use them for the good and build on our successes. But to recognize that when it comes to doing the right thing, our default position of personality should not be the arbiter, and that should not be our North Star. Doing the right thing should be our North Star. And being conscious that we are going to have a gravitational pull in a specific direction, even if it's subconscious, is an important part of to be a principled human being. Not to be because of our nature, because of our rhythm, our status quo. But
Rabbi, I can't hear you, and I don't think anyone else can either.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
For some reason, the computer just shut down, and when I brought it back up, it went into mute. So let me just actually make sure that I don't know what has happened. So I'll make sure that I'm not keeping anyone out of here. And sorry about that. And then there's something in the chat. The image is frozen and the sound is fading. Okay, how long? I don't know how long you guys have to live with that. Sorry.
No, go back 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Yep. Yep.
Oh wow. I have no idea what I said. 4 minutes.
There you go.
You were talking about how it was in Abraham's nature
Yes.
to be kind, and he brought that to the world.
Yes. Okay. So it was in Abraham's nature to. Sorry. It was in Abraham's nature to be a kind, giving, loving person, and that is what he fought for the and even though society didn't like what he was doing, he was talking about this invisible God, and he was presenting a radically different perspective of purpose, godliness, and human behavior, because it was a very selfish society. He and Sarah devoted their lives to bring goodness and love to the world. So when God tells him, and just someone chime in if you heard this already from me, because I can't remember exactly what I said 4 minutes ago. When God tells him to take his child and sacrifice him, bring him as an offering, this is something which runs so counter to Abraham. It runs counter to Abraham because here Mr. Lover of humanity has to hurt somebody. Mr. Lover of humanity has to not only hurt somebody, but it's going to be his own child. Here he has devoted himself to spreading throughout the world this loving attitude, and he's devoted to it, and he wants it to outlive him. And now he's on in years. He's got only one child to carry it on, and he's going to now be destroying his legacy, not his legacy as far as people will remember him, but the continuity of this idea in the world. So for him, this command of God, bring your child as an offering, it has his system had to rebel against it in every which way. And yet, his response to God is, okay, God who I love and who I respect, if you tell me to do it, I'm going to do it now, without delay, without question, without protest, without pushback. So the Torah is saying there, now I know how much you're committed to me. Because all these years, you've been on a great track, but it's been your track of finding connectedness between people, helping people. You have an inn to give food to people out in the desert. You're spreading love of God, connecting people to love God, spreading the idea that God loves them. It's all your nature. Now you're working really hard. You're working against the tide of society. This has been very difficult for you, but really it's all your effort to perpetuate and to succeed in the lane
It's happening again, Rabbi.
Yeah, you're almost at the same place you were last time, but you froze. No audio. Nothing.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do.
You're back.
So pick up right there before you forget.
Okay. So So what God is saying, let me just make sure I'm on. Yeah, what God is saying to Abraham is, and God is telling us in the Torah there, is that now I know you, Abraham, care not so much about doing what you do, but caring about what I want you to do. Because until now, I've been telling you to do something that's totally within your nature. You're following your nature. You're pushing your potential to incredible lengths, which I really appreciate. And you're great, you and Abraham and Sarah. You're wonderful people. But I haven't seen you really rise above your natural tendencies, because it's our natural rhythms, our status quo is that can be very, very crushing, in the sense that it keeps us in a specific zone, a specific lane. And here you were able to, because I want something which is contrary to your natural rhythm, you say, okay, I'm ready to do it. Now I know the Torah is going to tell us this week. Now I know that you really care about me. So if you take that to personal, to more current events, are personal, like we are in 2022. You losing me again? No.
I can see you and hear you.
Okay, good. So, okay. So first of all, we all know what it means to have a rhythm, right? Some people, a person likes to give charity, they give charity, and that's beautiful. There's nothing to criticize there. But if that's what they like, or that's what their rhythm is it, are they, when they have something to do which isn't their rhythm, are they willing to rise above their tendencies and their lifelong conditioning, self-conditioning, or either conditioned by society or by their family? So, example that I've given before, which apparently no one heard, was imagine if someone who has an even-keeled temperament. They're not easy to ruffle, and they're calm. So now they're sitting, whatever, with friends, and they see an injustice. Someone vulnerable is insulted, or something that really should grate on the moral fiber of a caring person. And this person is calm. Maybe he addresses it, says that's not nice, but it's calm enough. That person, because they know that their demeanor is a calm one, they really have to ask themselves, am I being calm now because that's just what I do? Or is it perhaps would be correct for me to get riled up right now, to be emphatic and passionate, to make a point that this is wrong? Just to follow my current isn't necessarily the holy way to go. It may be a wonderful attribute, but life sometimes doesn't call for a different attribute. And for me to stick with an attribute because this is what I do what I do, that's about me. It's not about God. It's not about goodness. It's not about a higher thinking. So I would have a person with an even-keeled temperament specifically should have to ask, is my instinct right now to stay even-keeled, is that because it's my instinct or because it's the right thing? Is actually the situation calling out something different from me? Something that's not like what I usually do. The other way. And in the opposing direction, a person who is very passionate and temperamental and can get triggered, and getting triggered is sometimes, it makes it expresses a thought. Sometimes it works against the program. That person who is now about to just blow up because they saw this terrible, hurtful disrespect going on in front of them, they have to ask themselves, am I about to blow up because that's what I do? Or does this situation really need a blow up. Maybe the most effective way is for me not to do that, but for me to stand up for right, stand up for morality, stand up for this vulnerable person. But I'm going to do it in an even keeled way because I think that'll be more effective. And just blowing my lid, maybe what I'm going to get, what I'm going to say is going to get lost in the heat of my temper. The point of it is that the Torah wants us, and calling it binary, meaning two, is kind of simplistic. But the idea is there's my lane and the lane I don't take you to. And the splitting of the hooves is in what we said last week, is that when we're approaching the world, and we want to recognize that there's a possibility for two different lanes. There's mine, and this is what I don't usually do. And I really have to keep that in mind as I engage the world. So this is, it comes to play in food, more specifically, is where the Torah brings it up. Because food, and this is what I was saying before, when everything went dark, food is an arena in which we regularly engage the world, but not just the world, the physical world, but also the sensuality of the world, the pleasure of the world. And the pleasure of the world is really an attractive thing. And pursuit of pleasure is often something that can take us a little off the rails of our vision of who we need to be. So,
Rabbi,
lost
is
me
it-
again.
no. I wanted to, I don't know if it's too soon, if I'm allowed, but can I ask a question?
Go for it.
So, when you were talking about, just stepping back from our normal way of being, and I started thinking about free choice and Adam and Eve, and now it's all being related to food. And I started thinking about, if Adam and Eve had, I don't know if it was their natural way of being to do what they did. I don't know if, that was a test the same way Abraham is being tested like that with food. But what are your thoughts in terms of a comparison? And if Abraham passed the test, then why isn't he, did he redeem us in any kind of way? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it fits in very well. The difference, the distinction between Adam and Abraham is we call Abraham Avinu, our father, Sarah Imenu, which is our mother. In other words, we see them as a direct ancestor, not just genealogically and biologically. Their path in life is something that we look and say, they set our path for us. We still look at them not just as ancestors in the genealogical sense. They're our North Star. We don't say that about Adam and Eve. We don't say that about Noah. Now, when you go to Adam and Eve, because to get back to this, Adam and Eve are actually a good example of what I'm talking about, which is that we eat every day. We all eat every day. And therefore, while there's a whole panoply of pleasures that can be partaken of, and some of them we only get rarely, some of them we get more, but one thing that's steady is eating. You gotta eat. And hopefully eating something you like. So that's an arena that the Torah uses as symbolizing the wrestle we have with the physical pleasures of the world. And the physical pleasures of the world are in a way the most seductive part of life, which takes us off course of who we know we need to be, or we think we need to be when things are nice and quiet and we're not disturbed and everything's calm and you have the vision of who I can be today. Then the things that present a challenge are knock us off the horse. See, the pursuit of pleasures is not only food pleasures, the pursuit of any pleasures, that is a common challenge. So we look at food, since it's such a common arena, that we look at that as a symbol of it. Now, we talk about Adam and Eve. it's a great example, because what does God say? God tells them these are the first beings. I'm not making this a study of Adam and Eve because I want to get back to this, but it is important, it is helpful here. Adam and Eve are beings who are totally connected with God. They're God's first beings, and their consciousness is a God consciousness. And they see in the world purpose. God gave them, created trees for a purpose, and God created animals for a purpose, and created them for a purpose. And therefore, they're not into their nakedness doesn't bother them, because there isn't the self-consciousness. Even though they themselves, they're going to have relations, but they don't see it, all the layers of selfishness and negativity that come with it. They're seeing a very pristine world. And the pristine world is not a selfish world. Pristine world is, what does God want out of us? When the Torah describes, it says that God told them, you can have of all the fruits of the garden. In other words, you can partake of all the pleasures of the world. And it's a mature world God created, right? He didn't create saplings, he created trees. And so there's a mature world, plenty of pleasures for them to have in a mature way. And God says, there's just one tree, don't eat from that. So in their minds, that tree, the tree in the other corner, that tree has a purpose, and part of its purpose is that it can feed me so that I can be a good functional human being. I can eat from that tree. This tree is there to test my discipline. I'm not supposed to eat from it. That's off limits. So where did they start to go downhill? The Torah says very explicitly, they looked at the fruit and saw that it was luscious to the eyes. The chisavo einayim, that it was luscious to the eyes. Took it and ate it, and that was the issue. That there's nothing wrong with luscious to the eyes. What's this, like a sin, right? It's that they crossed over from the God-focused, principle-focused, objective-focused conscience to, I think I'm going to like that. That's going to be tasty. So even though it's not a crime to think something's going to be tasty, but that introduced the selfishness, the self-directedness. And that's where that threw a monkey wrench into everything. So food in general has that power over us. And to be able to engage our food in a way that, I'm not saying to eat something that doesn't taste good, but it tastes good, but to eat it with a sense of responsibility, and for something more than just this tastes good. If I've satiated myself, I don't have to eat more. Even though it's going to be good, so why shouldn't I take another bite? Because if I'm okay, then it's no longer about me, the nutrition. It's about me just deriving pleasure from the world. Maybe I need to curb that and try to use the world's pleasure as more for a higher purpose than just giving me pleasure. So in this arena, the Torah, that's where the Torah gives us this binary idea, is that there's the split hoof, that there's going to be, we want to try and stay above our instincts, not stay above, be able to rise above our instincts. In the, like I say, in the binary way, like the Abraham, he has the lane of being a lover, and now he's because the situation calls for it, God calls for it, the principle calls for it, he's able to rise above that and take the other lane, because it's not about him just following his nature, it's about doing the right thing. Kosher is an area where we have an exercise daily to be able to recognize our tendencies and say it doesn't have to be that way if it's not the right thing. Sometimes our tendency is the right way, that's fine, but not to just have our tendency be our North Star. Following impulses is not a good North Star. following a North Star is a good North Star. God, goodness. And hopefully we direct our tendencies in that way. And our tendencies take us that way. And if our tendencies don't take us that way, we're able to stick with the North Star and rise above our tendencies. Okay. So now we'll go to 69. The second column. And we were up to the second paragraph where it says the foot, the animal's foot, which is split, both touches the ground and separates us from the ground. So what is it? I'm sorry, they're not the animal's foot yet. We're talking about our foot. Our foot is where the rubber meets the road, where we meet the ground. But that's my head and so on. I'm not touching the ground, it's my feet. So it's the part of us that protects us from the ground. It therefore alludes to the notion that in our involvement with the physical world, we must remain separate from it, aloof in our dealings with materiality. The idea of the foot is the idea of engaging the world, but with some separateness, not getting totally swallowed up by it. Again, I don't want to open up a whole new conversation, but the shoe represents that it's not us directly engaging the world. We have some protection that keeps us separate. And because the Torah definition of a shoe is leather, so that's why in specifically spiritual situations, like on Yom Kippur, and there's another reason for that also, or when someone goes to a holy place, like when we go to the Ohel, to the Rebbe's Ohel, and it's not only there in Israel also, go to holy grave sites. The tradition is to take off the leather shoes and put on non-leather. Why? Because the idea is to be able that we relate. We can engage this materiality because it's holy. When Moses when God speaks to Moses from a burning bush, and he surprises Moses, what he says in the scripture. In this scripture, the Torah says, God says to him, "Take your shoes off your feet, because this is holy ground." In other words, who cares if you wear shoes? What does shoes and holy ground have to do with anything? Saying it's holy ground, you don't need protection here. So, but most of the time we do. And that's what we're talking about here in the foot. As Rabbi Lubavitch remarked to a distinguished student of his who had apparently become overly immersed in his boot business, he said, "I have seen feet in boots, but a head in boots." His comment to his student was the idea that generally, most of us have to work to make a living. I shouldn't say most of us. I mean, generally, the human idea is we work to make a living, or even if we're not making a living, we're working to make our lives work, and we're engaging the physical world. Let's say the simpler one is we're going to make a living. So I have to pay my bills. So I'm working. So and that's a good thing. But it's like we'll say, and I'm not. People will sometimes comment on the expression we have is that, I'm a lawyer, I'm a dentist, I'm a teacher. Is that who you are? Or maybe a teacher, yes, but is that who you are, or are you you? And what you do to earn a living and hopefully make the world better is law, dentistry, whatever. Is this become our whole self-image? Are we totally engrossed in it? Or do we see our place in the world as being more complex than that? And it's not just about how we earn a living, because we earn a living, we may spend 10 hours a day doing it, but there's another 14 hours. What am I going to do with that? So here, Rabbi Shalom Dover was talking to a devoted disciple who was doing what he needed to do to earn a living, which is good. But apparently he saw in him that he's just so engrossed in it that he can't, that became his obsession and his primary focus. So he said to him, I see you sell boots. Feet belong in boots, not a head in boots, not your head. Let's keep your head into higher things. In light of our previous remarks about the necessity of embracing both Moses and Aaron's approaches to applying the absolute truth of the Torah to the relativity of human life, the split in the foot, by the way, what just came to my mind is that there's an elderly, very fine gentleman who has been involved probably virtually his entire life in higher education, and he decades ago made tremendous breakthroughs in higher education accreditation for Talmudic seminaries for Judaic studies, because how does the Department of Education know what we're studying in Talmud? So he created a system where there's this interface. So there are different organizations that Yeshiva University, also the Biblical College. There's a way that we are accredited as official schools of higher education by the government, because they trust this intermediary. So he's already 90 and he's retiring, and he just left a message that I heard yesterday from my father. He left a message. He said, now I'm going to have to find entirely different things to think about during my prayers. He was joking. He was saying, because he said it obsessed him, and it took, so that was what he was doing, and he found himself often not focusing on God during his prayers, but what he had to do. So I'm not going to have to do this. Now I have to find other things to think about as I pray. Again, he said it as a witticism. In light of our previous remarks about the necessity of embracing both Moses and Aaron's approaches to applying the absolute truth of the Torah to the relativity of human life, the split in the foot can be additionally understood to signify this duality: the necessity of lovingly embracing those who are estranged, while resisting the urge to dilute the Torah's message into a form that we imagine will be more appealing. As the sage Hillel said of Aaron, he loved people, brought them close to the Torah, then to the Torah, not the reverse. Okay, so here, the Rabbi is quoting the Rabbi on something which is something that's very central to the mind and heart of any Chabad couple who does what we do. Because you have the Moses idea, and we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. The Moses idea of Moses was truth. He saw things from the inside out. This is the way it's supposed to be. This is the book. That's what it's supposed to be. Then you have Aaron. Aaron was a people person, and Aaron's on the retail end and the user end, and saying, it's not so simple. There's that's the way it should be, but how do we translate that into someone's life? People can't necessarily, if they have certain, they built up a certain status quo in their lives, certain conditions in their lives, a family, whatever it is, then you can't just all of a sudden just blow everything up. So Aaron was the one who was very sensitive and plugged into people's struggles and the idiosyncrasies that go on in life. So he and Moses were like two different poles. Moses was much more straight up, this is the way it has to be. And that Aaron was helpful in translating that into, okay, how can this work? So the idea is that they're both very important. We need to, for people loyal to Torah, we need to have a clear vision of what should be. Then we have to also, if we care about people, we need to be open to possibilities of of massaging that within the scope of Jewish law, finding what can be. So while for me, in my life, if I'm trying to make a Jewish practice and tradition user friendly to someone, whether it comes whether it comes to a wedding or kosher in your house or Shabbos, whatever it is. So there's the ideal, which we call the ivory tower ideal, and then we want to see how can, for someone, it's a bit much. They can't handle that in its entirety, as far as they're concerned. Say, what can we do to make it easier? No, some things you can't do. Someone says, I insist on having shellfish in my house. I can't kosher your house. There's nothing I can do about it. But if there are ways, if there's something I can do, and help us say, well, would you mind eating the shellfish in the driveway before you come into the house? Great. That's not something that it says in Jewish law as advice for keeping a kosher house, but you want to be able to figure it out. So here, what it says this binary idea of engaging the world also it reflects this binary idea of, the truth of Moses and the caring of Aaron. And what the final thing he brings is that the Talmud tells us encourages us to be students of Aaron. What does that mean? Students of Aaron says loving peace, pursuing peace, loving people, and bringing them close to Torah. So the Rebbe pointed out that it doesn't say bring the Torah close to them. Bring them close to the Torah. We can't violate Torah for the sake of Torah. We bring people close. Now, sometimes within Torah, there are things that are permissible. Maybe it's not the ideal, but it's permissible. If it's permissible and it allows someone to keep Torah, I'm in. That's not called bringing the Torah to them, because the Torah is what the Torah is, and the Torah has built-in allowances for certain things. But the idea is we want the Torah to ultimately the North Star of Torah to stay firm, and we'll encourage our friends to take a step closer to Torah. And we want to make that Torah as accessible as possible, but it's still, we're not moving it off its place. We're just making it more accessible. Taking the Torah to them would mean changing the rules of the game, and we can't do that. Maybe we can do one more paragraph here. The other kosher sign is rumination. Rumination is chewing the tongue. This alludes to the necessity of deliberating before engaging the mundane aspects of life. First, we must weigh our intentions, ensuring that they are purely toward elevating the world, purging them of any desire to simply indulge in sensuality for its own sake. Second, we must weigh the methods we employ in elevating the world, ensuring that they conform to the guidelines set forth in the Torah. Okay, so this is a bit of a mouthful, but I think coming from the world of spiritual refinement, keeping our own spiritual refinement as a goal, there is something to be said about not indulging in sensual pleasure just for the sake of sensual pleasure. There's always a higher purpose. Friday nights, we eat a Shabbos meal. It's supposed to taste good. We're celebrating Shabbos. It's supposed to taste good, and we're supposed to feel in that pleasure, God's pleasure in our world. On Shabbos, God feels pleasure, and God wants us to feel a pleasure to be able to plug into the divine pleasure. Pleasure between husband and wife isn't supposed to be two people having selfish pleasure, but pleasure in the union. Having a breakfast or lunch. It's okay to eat something that's pleasurable, but the idea is to keep focused that it's really not about, I didn't sit down now to have pleasure. I sat down to eat because I'm a human being and God wants me to eat, to have strength, to be able to have a productive day. There's always a goal there. And some of you have heard from me in the past that one of those formative little vignettes we all have, I guess, from growing up. When I was in yeshiva in Morristown, and we studied about this, I said to our teacher, may he rest in peace, I said, so how do I put, I'm very good at fooling myself. How do I know when I'm eating? I was 17 years old, whatever. I said, how do I know when I'm eating for God? By saying so? Or eating for the right purpose? So what he said to me then was, it was very practical to me, and it helped me. He said, you go down for dinner today. We're in Morristown at Benedict College, and we had chicken every night. And the deal was, we'd get online, we'd go by the file by the cook, Mrs. Rappaport, and then she would ask us if we want a top or a bottom. And then we get some starch and vegetable. So he said, when you go down to dinner tonight, and Mrs. Rappaport asks you if you want a top or bottom, say whichever one you want. Just give me whatever you got. I said, okay, what's that going to do for me? He said, let's say you like a top. If you get a bottom, eat it, it's not going to kill you. Right? You're sitting here, you want to eating for the right reason, for nutrition and so on. The bottom is going to be just as nutritional as the top. Even if you get the top and you enjoy that, you will have shown yourself that your real objective was not about the top. It was about eating, about doing the right thing, what was necessary of you. That you enjoy it, good, great. But it wasn't the enjoyment and the pleasure and the seductiveness of the eating pleasure that drew you in. You were standing a little bit removed from it and saying, if this is about eating food so that I can do what I need to do. It happens to taste good, that's a bonus. And that made sense to me. And it still does. So this is what we're saying here. The idea of rumination is going slow before partaking in pleasure, just assessing. Okay, what's this about? I don't want to get sucked into this, and I don't want to be owned by the pleasure. I want to look at this exercise and guide it in the right way, and it's not just about the pleasure. And the second part, he says, is we must weigh the methods we employ in elevating the world, ensuring that performing the guidelines set forth in Torah. And therefore, in what we're doing, that when we get swept up in something emotional and pleasurable, we can blur lines. We want to keep a little bit of a distance and not get too excited about the world's attractions. Like if someone, I'm running a business here, right? So, and for that, we need funds. So if someone calls today and says they have $1 million for me, that's great. Well, I don't know what strings are attached. So what is it just free and clear? What do you need? And not get too excited about it. And unfortunately, there have been times where I haven't been able to provide what people wanted in exchange for a hefty donation because it just wasn't the right thing for me to do. And it hurts, but it's just the way it has to be. And that's what we're saying, that you have to, these things weigh and measure before we partake in the pleasures of the world. So we'll leave it over there. Unless there are any questions, if not, God willing, we'll have more consistent technology next week. I got to get my computer.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. You.